course, I'll remind you all, but you are slated to take it on Wednesday, June 2nd at 11 o'clock. So that's the time that you'll be showing up to take it. Your exam is 25 questions. It is all stimulus-based questions, which means that every multiple choice question you see is going to come with a graph, a chart, a political cartoon, a map, something like that, a quote. So they're a little bit more challenging questions, but there are only 25 questions that you have to answer in 2 hours. So that should be pretty doable for you. And the exam only covers what we have learned second semester. So in other words, you don't really need to focus on anything much before World War II. We're pretty much starting with World War II and beyond. So you don't have to worry about all that Gilded Age, Progressive Era, things like that. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of the content. 25 questions, all stimulus-based. Next Wednesday, June 2nd at 11 o'clock. World War II and beyond. That's your exam. And the final announcement I have, and then if any of you have questions, let me know. There's a lot of announcements today, is just that yesterday I gave out STAR results. So the vast majority of you should know where you stand with that. But if you were not here yesterday and you need to know your STAR scores, then please stick behind today. After we get off the Zoom call, we're going to get off 10 to 15 minutes early, and I'll conference with you and let you know how you did on the STAR. So that way you'll be updated with that information. And I think that is it in terms of announcements. So does anyone have questions for me about missing work, exam exemptions, the reviews this week, the test, the STAR? Lots of stuff I just covered. So does anyone need clarification on anything? Yeah, so the question was if you're in person, which I know some of you sometimes are in person or sometimes in Zoom, but do you have to sit in the test even if you're exempt? Yeah, like if you're coming on campus, then you are expected to be in the classroom of your exam at the given time, but you don't necessarily have to take it, so you'll just be sitting there. So I would say bring entertainment if that is you. Anyone else have any questions? Okay then, so today we are going to review World War II. Now I want to say this, that we don't have time this week to be, covering everything that's going to be on your exam. Y'all have put in the hard work with reviewing for the STAR. So I want to encourage you to go back and look in that STAR review folder and get some extra studying in this week. Because we're not doing the intense reviews, just like the big picture stuff. And so we are going to cover like World War II because that's a big topic. We're going to cover like prior containment and Cold War because that's a big topic. But really there's a lot of gaps, and I'm telling you this ahead of time so you know to study, that we're not covering this week. So big stuff, yes, the smaller bits of information that you need to study, not necessarily. So it is up to you to let me know if you need help with anything, if you're confused with anything, and it's up to you to go back and look at those reviews we did before when we got more into like I guess you'd say the nitty-gritty of it, where we looked in depth with these things. So we're just going to talk about the basics of World War II today, like what caused it, what the impact of it was, and then we have a video that we're going to watch that talks about the main events of World War II. So with that said, I need y'all's help. The video just covers the main events of World War II, so I actually want to start out with like a 5-minute discussion about the causes and impact. So you guys help me out, unmute yourselves, type in the chat, and tell me what was a cause of World War II. And there are several, so you're thinking of World War I. So what was a cause of World War II? All right, I got one in the chat. Let me see more. People have been slow to respond today. I think that's why I'm giving you the reminder to study on your own some, because I feel like it's already left some of our brains since taking the STAR test a few weeks ago. Anyone other than Sophie have anything to say before I go over her answer?
Reinforcements.
A cause of World War II. You could also tell me what got the United States involved in World War II. Okay. All right, I'm getting some stuff. Thank y'all. Okay, well, so we're getting some stuff mixed up, unfortunately. But I mean, it's good that we're clearing this up because I don't want y'all to be confused. Someone is saying that U.S. ships were exploded. That was actually World War I. Had someone say the assassination of the Archduke. That again is World War I. And so we're getting a little bit mixed up. German submarines are World War I. So anything about sinking ships and stuff like that, World War I, not World War II. So some people are getting a little bit mixed up there. But the main thing, and I see this from two people in the chat, is kind of how World War I ended, right? Like someone is saying the defeat of Germany in World War I, and someone else is saying the Treaty of Versailles. After World War I, there was this so-called peace treaty that forced Germany to take all responsibility for World War I. They had to pay back a ton of money for all the damage that was done. They had to get rid of their military. They had to get rid of their land, and they were just left devastated, okay? And if you were treated like that, even if maybe if you deserve to be treated like that, because Germany by no means was like a good guy in World War I, but you'd be mad, right? Like anyone would be. And so that is part of what leads to World War II. We have this country that just feels like they've been screwed over, essentially, and so they want to retaliate. But there's more to it too, okay? So there are things that play into each other. Germany is left devastated after World War I with the Treaty of Versailles. Add to that, 10 years later, in 1929, you all know about the Great Depression, the stock market crash that not only affected the United States, it affected the entire globe. And so this country, which is already devastated, is even more devastated by an economic depression. And so people are desperate. They're struggling to survive. And then all of a sudden you have someone like Hitler who comes up and he says, I'm going to make your life better. And people grasp onto that. And so all of these things are a perfect breeding ground for this second conflict, because it's them being mad and resentful over how they were treated in World War I, being put in an even more desperate situation with the Great Depression. And then we have these dictators who take advantage of the situation and promise people a better life. And people want to believe that. And so they grasp onto it. And all of a sudden we have these terrible dictators that are starting another world war. And so that's the simplest way I would think about the beginning of World War II and why it occurred. Now, why the United States got involved, I would have taken that answer too, is because Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. So yeah, it was a naval base that was attacked in Hawaii. So that's why the United States got involved. But in Europe, why they got involved, or why the war started, had to do with the rise of dictatorships and just the economic problems that the world was facing during the time. So in terms of its impact, can someone please tell me, and again, there's several answers here, how World War II impacted the United States? Like, what did it do to us politically, economically, socially? How did things change in the United States? Come on, y'all. You know this stuff. I know that someone in here has an inkling and you're just not speaking up or typing in the chat, but I know y'all know this. I'll give y'all hints. Like, think about women, think about African Americans, think about globalization. Think about the economy. What are some of the outcomes of World War II for the US? Okay, good. I got a couple of good answers in here. So it helped our economy. Someone in one of my other classes said it hurt our economy, and that's what you would initially think, because going to war is not cheap. But here's the thing. The war was not fought on United States territory, but it was fought all over Europe. So what that means is US factories were responsible for pretty much supplying all of Europe with what they needed. And that made our factory production soar to very strong points. And that's like a really good thing, obviously, for the US economy, because that's opening more jobs, and people desperately needed jobs after the Great Depression. So we come out of the war not only with a recovered economy from the Great Depression, but as the strongest economy in the world, because everywhere else in the world that was a developed country had been impacted to a much greater extent by the war. Also, someone saying it made our country one of the strongest, military-wise, economic-wise, and also politically. So military-wise, like, we did develop a lot of new weapons. We have the atomic bomb after World War II, really strong scientific advancements. And of course, I already talked about the economy and how that boomed, but it made us an international superpower. You might remember after World War I, the United States wanted to return to isolationism, which means we just wanted to focus on ourselves, stop worrying about the rest of the world, right? After World War II and ever since then, that has not been the case. The United States is very involved in what other countries do. And so we are very connected with the rest of the world in a way we weren't before. Now, I mentioned women and African Americans. No one said anything about that. Okay, someone just entered that. More women wanted to get jobs instead of staying home. So yeah, it changed the role of women because so many men were fighting overseas that women had to take their jobs. And so women were in the factories. Also, even women were joining the military. And that's significant because after World War II, they're like, hey, we can do what a man can do. Like, Rosie the Riveter showing off her strength was propaganda during World War II. And all of a sudden men get home and they're like, you need to be a housewife. And women are like, wait, just like 5 years ago, you were saying I should fight in a war and get involved and do all these things. And now you're saying be a housewife? And so it starts pushing women to kind of develop their own movement to get out of the household and not just take on that role of a housewife. So we see changes there. And then with African Americans, they gained a lot of respect in World War II as well for working in the factories and for being some of the best fighter pilots in the war. There's a lot of respect gained for African Americans, which resulted in the military being desegregated, with white people fighting alongside Black people. And it also helps lay a better foundation for the civil rights movement, where Black people were actually, for the first time really in history, able to have some success in pushing for their rights. So lots of impacts there. So I wanted to have this little discussion with you before jumping into our video, because the video does not touch on the impacts on the US home front. But those are very, very significant concepts that you need to know for the test. So now let's watch that video I'm referencing, and we're going to learn about, what actually happened during the conflict. So where you need to go, follow my screen.
Reinforcements.
Is in this yellow folder that says exam review. So this week we're going to be watching a few videos, like I said, pretty chill, but they're all going to be in this yellow folder underneath the final project folder called exam review. And when you click on the assignment, unfortunately you do have to click on it. You can't see the link if you don't, which is annoying. But once you click on that assignment, it brings you to a video and it brings you to a Google form. Now you do not right now need to click on the video because I'm going to share my screen with you and show it. But you do need to click on this Google form. And what this is I'm not even sure how many questions, probably like 6 to 8 questions that are coming straight from the video just to help make sure that you're following along with what the video is saying. So it looks like this. There's just simple multiple choice questions, and it does correspond with the video, and all the questions are in order. So what that means, if you are a smart student, is that you have the Google form up right now at this moment, and you are answering those questions as we're watching the video together in class today. And that way, once it's done, it's a 13-minute video, you can submit it and be done. Okay, so I'll give y'all a few seconds to get there, and in the meantime, if any of you have questions about what we're doing or where we should be, let me know in the chat so I can help you out. I don't want anyone to be lost, but right now you should be in exam folder, click on the Google form and have that up ready to answer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start this video for you all. If y'all can't hear it, if you can't see it, if there's anything wrong, make sure to let me know, because it is a full 13 minutes. And again, make sure you're following along and answering those questions as you go.
After World War I in 1929, the Great Depression varied across nations. It started with the collapse of the American stock market and quickly spread to Europe, then worldwide. It created a severe worldwide economic collapse. In a lot of countries, the civilians started to be against government and capitalists. Then, they turned to support extremism, asked to redivision colonies to get more resources to solve the national crisis. After World War I, although Italy was in the winning Allies, they weren't satisfied and felt like they were being scammed with what they received in the Treaty of Versailles. Benito Mussolini was the founder of the fascists in Italy and received a lot of support from the military. He then became the prime minister and formed the first fascist government in Europe. After that, there was Germany in the defeated side. Germany had to pay a huge amount of war fee, hence they had to print a lot of cash to pay off their debt. The inflation rate was highly increased. At this time, Adolf Hitler became the national savior. He used his speech talent to spread his ambition and rise the national pride of the Germans. In 1933, Hitler became prime minister, took control, and formed the second fascist government in Europe. In Japan, the Great Depression destroyed the whole country's economy. Because Japan was seriously shorted of important industrial material, they declared war to get resources from the other colonies in Asia. At that time, most of the colonies in Asia belonged to Great Britain, France, America, and Netherlands. Hence, Japan needed more allies. They came to find Germany and Italy for help. The three countries had a lot of things in common and all considered themselves as master races, and most importantly, they had a lot of enemies in common. The allies of Germany, Italy, and Japan were formed, called the Axis powers, with the intention of taking over the world. In 1931, taking advantage of the warlord era in China, Japan started a full-scale invasion to Manchu, invaded this area and created a puppet state called Manchukuo. In 1937, Japan enlarged the invasion further into China mainland. With the speed attack strategy, Japan quickly took over Beijing, Shanghai, and Nanjing, the capital, with a bloody massacre. The Chinese commander, Chiang Kai-shek, moved to the capital, Chongqing, and held on there. He tried to ally with the leader of the other Chinese warlords to carry the resistance against Japanese. Back to Europe, Hitler broke the Treaty of Versailles and started to rebuild Germany's military. However, the Allies seemed not to care much about it. In 1938, the Germans invaded Austria and Czechoslovakia without any struggles. After that, Hitler wanted to take his army up to Northern Europe. Because he didn't want to face the Soviet Union, he made an agreement with Stalin, and they agreed that they would both invade Poland. The Allies of Germany and Russia was formed. In September of 1939, the German forces and Russian forces both attacked Poland. At that time, England and France both declared war with Germany. Although the Polish army resiliently fought on both fronts, they couldn't stand the overwhelming strength of the two neighbors, and ended up being invaded. Right after that, Russia invaded Finland. The Germans invaded Denmark and Norway. The Britain-France allies sent reinforcement but was completely defeated. The full-scale strategy Hitler was using, similar to German strategy in World War I, head to the west, take over France, and then defeat Britain from there. After that, the Germans would turn back to the east, defeat Russia to win the whole war. To achieve that purpose, the German forces attacked Belgium, trying to pass over the French defense system. The Allied also very quickly sent reinforcement. It was like the previous World War I repeating itself. But this time, Hitler had a new strategy. In the south, the French had revealed a minor weak point because they didn't think that the Germans would go into a small, narrow jungle. So, 50 German divisions quickly crossed the jungle and trapped the Allied reinforcements in. The German forces surrounded them from every corner, destroyed the most well-trained French army. The last group of the British forces luckily survived by escaping by the sea. Taking advantage of the wind, the German forces took over Paris and invaded the whole of France. Hitler finally did what they couldn't do in World War I. He created a new puppet state in France, and France became Germany's new puppet. This move helped Germany to easily take control of the French colonies in Africa without sending their forces there. Hitler now started making a plan to invade Britain. To be able to land in Britain, the Germans needed to win the war in the air. The German Air Force attacked London, but was stopped by the Royal Air Force and lost a lot of fighter planes. The Britain invasion now had to be delayed, but sometimes the cities in Britain still got attacked by the German forces. Back to the Italian fascists, this war happened mostly in Africa. In August 1940, the Italians successfully took over Somalia, a British colony. After that, they targeted Egypt and Greece. The British then sent reinforcements to Greece, and that made Hitler worried and started to focus more on the southern front and make or threaten other small countries to join the fascist side. The Germans invaded Yugoslavia and together with the Italians won the battle in Greece. On the 22nd of June 1941, the Germans and their allies sent over 3 million troops to the Soviet Union and started the biggest land invasion in history. The Germans strongly attacked and used a very effective sieging strategy, destroyed and captured millions of Soviet Union's troops, pushed the Soviet Union further into the mainland. It would be the end if the Germans could take over Moscow. Suddenly, the weather became cold. Under the brutal cold, the advantage was now in the Soviet Union's hands. The Russians started the counterattack, pushed the German forces back. The Germans now had no choice but to wait until the winter ended. In Asia, Japan tried to enlarge their Manchukuo land by invading the Soviet Union and Mongolia. Unfortunately, they were quickly stopped and had to cancel the northern invasion. Their situation in China also got stuck since the allies of the Chiang Kai-shek, the warlords and Communist Party, drastically fought back. In September of 1940, the Japanese tried to cut the communication between the Chinese and the West by taking over the French colonies in Indochina. To justify their invasion, Japan created the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, announced to help the yellow race defeat the white power. At that time, the US was neutral, but still against the fascist invasion. The Americans put an embargo of oil and steel on Japan. In return, the Japanese started a sneak attack on the American Pearl Harbor and caused huge damage for American Navy force in the Pacific Ocean. Taking that advantage, Japan started their full-scale enlarging war to kick the West out of Southeast Asia. All the colonies in Southeast Asia are now under the Japanese brutal domination. In Europe, the Germans built hundreds of contention camps to keep and execute the prisoners, political criminals, even gay and disabled people. The most famous one was the Jews massacre, with the number of victims over 11 million. Right after the winter ended, Hitler carried on with his plan to invade Soviet Union, focused on getting close to the south of Soviet to get the oil. The most important battle then happened in Stalingrad. That place was called the Hell on Earth. The soldiers had to fight their best to survive. The battle lasted a constant 200 days. The victory belonged to the Soviet Red Army. The German 6th Army there were surrendered and completely defeated. The Soviet Army now took advantage and started a full-scale counterattack. At this time, the US joined the war. The US Army came to Africa, together with the British in Egypt, and kicked out the fascists out of Africa. On the Pacific Ocean, the Midway battle between the American and the Japanese was also the turning point with the victory for the US. The Japanese army was humiliatingly defeated, put an end for the Japanese full-scale invasion. After the Italians ran away from Africa, the Allied now planned to land in Sicily to take over Italy. A lot of Italian American soldiers were called to join this campaign. Also, a lot of people in Sicily had relatives living in America, so when the Americans arrived, they were warmly welcomed by the locals. With the mafia involved, the Italians started against the war. Mussolini started losing the support from the civilians. He was kicked out of the fascist council, and his power was also taken away. The Italian government then had a secret deal with the Allied to surrender. To stop it, the Germans suddenly sent 16 divisions to Italy to take over. After discussions, the Allied decided to open another front to distract the Germans in Italy and Soviet Union. Millions of Allied troops gathered in Britain, prepared for the biggest invasion ever in history. On the 6th of June, 1944, the Allied started the invasion of Normandy Beach. This was the biggest invasion from the sea to the land in history. This bloody battle caused a huge number of casualties for both Allied and the fascists. After a month of drastically fighting, the Allied got the advantage and kicked the Germans out of the military bases there. It was a stepping stone for the Allied to emancipate France. At the same time, the allies of American, British, and Chinese started to push the Japanese out of Myanmar. The US started 2 strategic battles on the Pacific Ocean to take over the Philippines, and on the other hand, to get control of some small islands, getting closer to Japan mainland. Back to Europe, the Allied non-stop headed to the east. They got to Belgium and tried to emancipate the Netherlands. Although the Allied winning speed was quicker than his plan, Hitler refused to admit his loss. He decided to start a counterattack to make the tables turn. He gathered the very last piece of German forces and resources to cross Ardennes Forest, tried to have an attempt to trap the Allied forces in one more time. After a long fight, the Allied got their advantage and pushed the German forces back. Not able to make up for their loss, the German forces had no hope. Hitler's mental and physical health went down quickly. The Allied then attacked Germany from both sides, and the Soviet quickly took over Berlin. The German fascists collapsed. The dream was no more. There was no hope. Hitler committed suicide in his secret bunker. 2 out of 3 fascists were collapsed. There was only one left. The Americans took over Iwo Jima and started attacking Okinawa, the last island between them and Japan mainland. The Japanese forces fought to the death, but still lost the island within 2 months. Now, the Allied had 2 choices. They could either send troops to Japan mainland and facing a possibly huge number of casualties, or make Japan surrender right away. In July 1945, the US successfully invented the nuclear bomb, and it could be used anytime. Britain and France realized that the Soviet Union was still keeping their army in the captured bases. They started to worry and decided to forewarn the Soviets. A nuclear bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, and then another one was dropped on Nagasaki. On the 13th of August, the Emperor Hirohito surrendered and put an end to World War II. Within 6 years of the war, at least 60 million people died and made World War II the bloodiest war in human history. The US and the Soviet Union became the new two super countries of the world. Due to different ideologies, the conflict between them started, and a new war started.
And that new war was the Cold War. Okay, so hopefully you guys got all the questions done on the Google form. I'm not going to go over anything unless y'all have specific questions for me, but I will just point out like the highlights from that video that you really need to understand for your exam. So the first thing is appeasement. It's not actually something mentioned in the video, but it does start talking about how Germany started taking over land and building up their military, which was against the Treaty of Versailles. But Britain and France didn't want to confront them. So Germany just kind of kept gaining momentum and getting bigger until it becomes hard to stop them. So that's yet another cause of World War II that we could say. Then, of course, you need to know the battle in the Pacific. That's against Japan. It all starts with the attack of Pearl Harbor. And then there's the turning point at the Battle of Midway that you need to know about, as well as Iwo Jima, and the ending of the war with the atomic bombs. As far as the war in Europe, big key points, of course, are those dictators like Stalin and Hitler and Mussolini and all of them. But then battles that you need to know about are Argonne Forest. You need to know about D-Day. You need to know about Stalingrad. So the biggest ones being Argonne Forest and D-Day for sure. But make sure that those are all things that you study and are aware of the significance of. So does anyone, like after looking at the Google form or watching the video, have any questions for me about what's on it? Nope. Okay, so if you're still working on the Google form, I'm hoping. Okay, someone's asking me, I thought the atomic bombs ended the war with Japan. That is correct. Yes. So I'm not sure if it's telling you it's wrong or what, but yes, it's the atomic bombs that end the war with Japan. So there you go. I gave everyone an answer. So anyways, that Google form, it needs to be submitted within 10 minutes. I'm not necessarily going to keep you on here. Oh, okay. So if it says no correct answer, it just means that I forgot to do an answer key for it. But don't worry about it. Like these reviews are just for the sake of review. I'm not giving you like a quiz grade on it or anything. It's completion. Seeing that you made an effort, so don't worry about it. All that means is I forgot to put the correct answer on it, so it would have told you were wrong no matter which one you put, because I didn't do the answer key for that one. But yes, it is the atomic bombs. Thanks for pointing that out. None of my other classes did, so I'll go back and make sure to change that. But anyways, like hopefully y'all are pretty close to getting that form done if you haven't already. If not, have it submitted by 1:40. But before you go, I did finalize the exam exemptions as you all were watching that. And if I told you you were exempt before, you still are, unless, I'm not meaning to call anyone out, but you need to know, Edgar, you did miss an extra class, so unfortunately no longer exempt from the exam. But the rest of you are. So if you are Tyler, Francisco, Caesar, Shantasia, Emmanuel, Sophie, Suzanne, James, Esmeralda, Katrina, or Ryan, you are all exempt from the exam. And I do just want to emphasize for Suzanne and James, if you miss one more class, just one more class, you're no longer exempt. So make sure that you're here every single day. And that goes for all of you, but especially you two, because you have the maximum number of absences. So, yeah. So anyways, if you're one of those people, then you don't have to take the test that day. You just need to show up to say hi and bye. But I will go ahead and let y'all off the Zoom call now. If you have any questions about exemptions, any questions about STAR scores if you weren't here yesterday, any questions about anything, let me know. but otherwise you're free to go, and make sure that form is submitted in 10 minutes, okay? Have a good one, everyone.